button for number 6, and your dad started playing, and I said, oh, okay. So.
So you were Marine Fire Department Science Center. Your dad was that bomb. So there's a difference in fire bombers and dive bombers. Now what are the dive bombers?
Well, we were first briefed on our missions, and we would take off and go and find our target. And at that time, we would drop our bombs on the target we were given to obliterate, if that's the right word for. And but there, my first combat duty was on Guadalcanal Island, which is a famous place here in the you want me to keep?
Yes, because Guadalcanal, that was captured by the Japanese, right?
Yeah.
Y'all were part of the liberation. Kind of liberated.
All of it. Of course, I wasn't there at the beginning of it, but I was there based there for a while. I was basically fitted to it in Bougainville Island, which is also in northern Sullivan Street, where we did bombing missions for New Ireland and New Britain. And at the end of that third tour, they sent me back to the United States. And came back through Hawaii, landed and came on home. I didn't care about spending much time in Hawaii. So I got back home, I can't remember exactly when, but it would have to be probably first part of 1934. Was that pretty well? And then you remember what I did after?
You when you came back in 44, you weren't discharged from service, were you?
No, I was still there long. I came back and I had a few days leave, came home I believe, and then I was stationed at El Toro, California, Marine Corps Air Station. And they housed us at the Laguna Beach Hotel, which was close by. And they made a flight instructor out of me at that time. So I spent some time out there, and at the end of that, discharged, and I didn't care about making a career out of it. So I went back home in a few days, and the time came up, and then I was a civilian.
Well, now what was your rank when you came out?
Captain.
You were a captain in the Marine Corps.
Right.
How many missions did you fly in the Pacific?
46 combat missions.
46 combat missions. Is that what a certain number required of you before you
No,
could go back home?
No, it just, we went on 3 combat tours before we come back home. We could have had more missions or less. It just
Depending on the combat tour.
yeah, depending on the combat tour.
Did you ever get shot down?
Never got shot down.
Got shot at?
Yeah, shot at plenty of times, yeah. But I reckon in pretty good shape to dodge all those firecrackers.
How fast did those planes go?
Well, I think we were speeding probably around 200 miles an hour. And it'll die, of course, it'll be much more than that. But it was a propeller-driven plane at that time. That's before the jets so famous.
How many propellers did it have?
Just one.
Just one in the block.
That's pretty well good.
This blows me away. In 46 missions, that's quite a bit. So did he talk much about the war when you were growing up?
Are we on?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, he would talk about it if you specifically ask him.
Okay.
He didn't volunteer it, he didn't bring it up, he didn't brag on it for sure, but he was very proud of his service. And we were proud of his service, and we, he was our family's personal hero.
Yeah. I could kind of get sort of a humbleness when they were talking about Guadalcanal, and he said, well, I wasn't quite there in the beginning, but he was part of that liberation.
Yeah.
That's something to be very proud about.
Well, there was a lot of serious ground fighting in Guadalcanal, and of course he did his part in the air.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I can't even imagine talking about the planes going faster than 200 miles an hour when they were diving. It's just,
Yeah, they would, he said they would get up 20 to 30,000 feet in the air. And if they were diving on the ship or whatever, he said it would look like a postage stamp. And they're just very tiny, but, you know, they would go down.
wow.
So, what was it, from what you remember, what was his life like after the war?
Well, he came back to Upson County. He was the veteran service, ran the veteran service office for maybe 3 years. That was to get the servicemen back into the civilian population, provide benefits and what have you. And he did that for several years. And then he bought a John Deere dealership here and ran that for 20-some odd years till I was an adult, till I was young. And he did very good with that. He ran for and was elected to the state legislature several times over the years. And he participated in community organizations, the Board of Education, Hospital Authority, such as that.
I didn't know any of that.
Me either, I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
right. He was very involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, like you said, he didn't really talk about it unless you asked him. How old were you when you started to find out?
Well, probably 6, 7, 8, when I got into school. All the little boys wanted to talk about what the dad did. And he was, I don't know that I had another friend with a father who was a pilot, although there were some others locally. But anyway, we were real proud of that.
Right. You were.
And so, was there anything in these recordings that surprised you, or that?
His good memory surprised me. He can recall events and dates and times, and I had heard his story before, but in bits and pieces over the years, and it was good to hear it laid out chronologically in that tape.
Right.
Yeah.
It made a lot more sense that way.
One thing, it's not in this recording, but I heard him again, when, it kind of makes more sense. That's why I put his and Billy Sanders together, because they spoke together at I think it was a Kiwanis meeting.
Yeah.
And, you know, in his talk, he talked about how proud he was to be a Marine. At the end of his talk, he sang the Marine song. It's he wouldn't bring it up, but if he did, he'd be sure you knew he was a Marine. Yeah.
In fact, one story about him, and I won't tell too many stories, but we went to my niece's graduation up in Athens at the Coliseum, huge place, and there was her, anyway, we went over there in 2 cars, so we're trying to get everybody together to sit together and what have you, and my dad disappeared. We went and looked, and he was over talking to a Marine in uniform. He said he could not pass by a Marine without speaking.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I know. That's amazing. It's just a real community.
It is. So, what do you think whether you feel is important that future generations know, or what do you think your dad would want future generations to know about the war?
Well, you know, there've been a lot of wars, a lot of conflict since then. That's been 75 or more years ago. But I think, you know, he was part of the greatest generation, and they were into duty, honor, and love of country. And I think that's what he would want to impart. You know, you've got to do your part to keep this whole thing going.
That's great.
And again, I think that's something we, talked about in these other interviews. it's easy for us to take for granted that, you know, freedom isn't free. You know, it's because of the greatest generation, you know, that we are able to live as we do today. So we're so grateful for them. I can't even describe it, you know.
I mean, really, the life that we live today is all because of the sacrifices they made.
Yeah. Well, today we have our professional soldiers who will go and do the job, do it well. And back in 1941, we just called up everybody off the farm, out of the mills, and everybody went, and they all did their part.
Right. I know this one, on there. How old was he when he went over?
When he joined, he was 24. He was in his pilot's training class, and I talked to one of his classmates years ago. He was one of the older ones in there at 24. You know, some of them 18 and 19.
That's still a baby, so that's, you know, that's amazing.
Well, in terms of just blank questions, I mean, we're getting through them pretty quick, but I mean, what's some things that you were wanting to share?
Well, he did his part. He was very proud of what he did, proud of being a Marine. He was very modest about it. He did not get out and make a show. But, you know, he was glad to do his part. He was glad to give out. There were two little stories I remember him telling. He joined as a naval aviation cadet. He joined the Navy.
That's right, you told me that.
And he went through the Navy training. They got the pilots, wings. They were finished with the class. He said, the class was there together. He said, the Marines walked in and said, we're taking the best pilots. He said, they took me.
So he started out in the Navy and wound up in the Marines. That's pretty neat. That's right, because you had that image of him, actually the one that's in the paper over there, that's him in his Navy uniform. Yeah. I've never heard of that happening before, so I remember you telling me that now. That's
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah.
That's really neat.
Yeah. Another thing. Now, he was glad when the war was over. He said that he was out at El Toro Marine Air Base out in California. It's between San Diego and Los Angeles. And he said when he got his orders discharging him, he went out and bought a new car. He got on Highway 80, US Highway 80 in San Diego. He said he drove straight through because Highway 80 goes to Upson County, right down south of here. He said he stayed on 80 the whole way. He only stopped for fuel and a little food. He said he drove straight through.
That's amazing.
Do you know how long that took him?
What's that?
Do you know how long that took him?
I'm gonna guess a good 48 hours because
Sure.
it's over 2,000 miles.
My husband is from San Diego. His dad was in the Navy at a Miramar.
Yeah, I remember.
And he's made that trip a couple of times across country, so, yeah. I imagine that took a little while, but for him not really stopping, yeah. He was ready to get home.
He was anxious to get home.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I love that. Well, I was curious, what is that you brought?
This is a blow-up of his unit's insignia.
Oh.
He was in VMSB 234.
Okay.
The MSB means Marine Scout Bomber.
Okay.
Anyway, this was a patch they had on the uniforms,
Okay.
a small version of this.
Wow.
I've been getting a picture of everybody as we finish. Would you want to do yours holding that?
I can.
That would be great. That's amazing.
So that was his patch.
Yeah, it was about that big around on the shoulder.
Okay. That's really cool.
And again, I know this isn't part of it, but it just makes me wonder, did he ever keep in contact with anyone?
He had a good friend he went through training with and may have been in the South Pacific with. I think his name was Newby. He lived in South Georgia. And I remember we stopped by there to visit him one time. one time going on vacation in Florida.
Uh-huh.
He died many years ago.
That's good that he did keep in contact with someone.
Shared some wonderful things. I mean, it's amazing what he's done for our country.
Yeah. He had a very impressive resume, and I think, like you said, he seemed very modest out of
You can hear it in his voice.
Yes.
which a lot of them were, but it's just mind blowing, you know, what they went through. And, you know, we hear this term greatest generation, and it's kind of easy, I don't want to say easy, but I think you start to forget just the meaning of that. And then you hear these stories again, and it's like, wow, you know, there's a
Well, it makes you
reason.
speechless, it really does. It's hard to do these interviews because it just blows you away.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
what
I
they went
get
through.
choked up thinking about what he went through.
Mhm.
And, anyway, he was a part of it, and he did his part.
And we're thankful for him. We're thankful for you coming up here, so,
Thank you.
so,
Okay.
thank
Mind if we
you
get your picture real quick?
Yeah.
so much.